Hello, it's Cried here, with a breakdown for the exciting Patch 1.05 Arena update for Armored Core 6 that comes along with some balancing changes and 8 new parts. There are also some hidden changes that weren't written out in the official patch notes. I'll cover everything together, so watch carefully. A foreword before we begin for those who are not new to my channel. I have been quite busy IRL, so I only had time to make a single video on recoil, which I waited for the patch to drop first. I figured my video can't possibly be screwed up by a patch the same day I posted if I just don't post at all. I really didn't want the recoil video to be filled with outdated footage because I think it is quite an important mechanic that people understand less than they think they do. And of course, FromSoft manages to outdate my video with the recoil spray changes and reworking part of the recoil system as well. Therefore, I will work on it a bit more before posting. But before then, I am very excited to test all the new parts out and play in ranked. So let's get you armed with the information you need for patch 1.05. First, the ranked system needs no introduction from me. I'm very glad they added this, which gives me hope they might add something like co-op based defense, which can also appeal to the PvE players. But I definitely encourage people to try out the PvP in Armored Core 6. And the other thing I want to say is please act like an adult and don't rage quit just because you know you'll lose. It just promotes a downward spiral of ever-increasing quitters. This applies to some of the S rankers that cheese their way up to S rank, and was even called out by the Japanese community for lag switching. How very embarrassing and truly unfair for those who actually earned their positions. If you're listening from FromSoft, getting quit on should definitely still count as a win, so it doesn't screw up our promotions. I find the Japanese very courteous, and I don't think they anticipated this many people with such low self-respect. Let's not disappoint the company that gave us such a great game, and then put all the blame on the developers, when us as the players could have easily done our part. Okay, now for the numbers you've been waiting for. Starting with the assault rifle changes. The Turner, Scudder, and Ronset-2 AR all have their accumulated impact and range increased, which I think is much needed. In addition to having less of a bullet spread caused by recoil for these 3 assault rifles, the Turner and Scudder also have their recoil reduced. Overall, these changes are good, but I don't think they're quite enough. Take a look at the damage and accumulated impact numbers of these rifles pre-patch and post-patch. The most notable one is the Scudder, which has an active DPS that's higher than even the Ronset-2 RF. Remembering to reload during disengages will make this number much more relevant. While it costs a bit less in weight and energy load, it is still losing out on other stats. Overall, I just don't think they're strong enough at the moment, and I would like to see something more that differentiates the assault rifles. Next, they also reduced the innate recoil spray of the machine guns to make them more accurate and slightly increased their range. Another nice change, because at close ranges, shotguns were just superior when used well pre-patch 1.05. This will differentiate the machine guns a bit with their increased range and continuous fire, since they don't suffer as much from recoil anymore. I think this is also a good place to introduce one of the new weapons, the Attache. The Attache is like a blend between assault rifles and machine guns. Despite its great item description and cool reload animation, I think it is a completely crap weapon when you consider its weight and energy cost. Let me explain why. First, the Attache doesn't have higher DPS nor accumulated impact, despite having a shorter range than the better assault rifle counterparts, like the Ronset-2 RF. And Ronset-2 RF is not an OP weapon. Rather, it's the other kinetic rifles that are weak. When you compare the Attache to the Ludlows or the Tangten, which both have higher DPS and accumulated impact per second than the Attache, other than its range, the only other strength you can capitalize on is its recoil. Because of the way recoil works, which I will explain in detail in my recoil video, 5 fire rates per second instead of the Ludlow or the Changchen's 10 fire rates per second favors the Attache. This is especially true when dual firing. So, despite the fact that it has quite similar recoil per second as the Ludlows, this is one area that it is significantly better at. However, since you can't fire machine guns when quick boosting, and the effect of recoil itself has been reduced anyway, for any arm that can properly recoil control machine guns, it is quite easy to cool down your recoil buildup through actions you would perform in battle. Furthermore, both of the machine guns are much cheaper than the Attache. This is why I think the Attache is super awkward as a weapon and just plain bad. Overall, I would say that the Attache is very easy to use because of its settings. However, it offers nothing that helps you play to its advantages. So even if you become better at controlling your armored core, these guns will offer you far less of a performance boost at mastering your build versus other better weapons. Allow me to explain the bazooka changes in full, including one of the later notes that says ACs with tank legs will now perform a readying action at the moment of firing bazookas or grenade launchers. First, bazookas have something called proxy det, short for proximity detonation. This means that the bullets explode when coming into a certain range of the opponent, making the bullet very annoying to dodge, especially with latency. So the nerf to the bazooka's AoE is not the blast radius, which is the stat displayed in game, but rather the proximity detonation radius, which is a hidden stat. This change might make the Xuange a bit more popular as an alternative because of the slightly larger proxy det radius. Previously, the Xuange already had a higher accumulated impact DPS and similar raw DPS, but its cost is also significantly higher than the Majestics. I definitely don't think Little Gem will be any more popular though. Next, a lot of people are confused by the readying action versus the readying stance on bipeds or reverse joints when firing heavy weaponry. However, the stance on bipeds is not what the patch note is referring to. Prior to patch 1.05, while you are grounded as a tank, charging any chargeable back weapon, including a missile, makes your arm raised into the ready fire arm, essentially skipping a portion of the animation and making bazooka shots fire quicker and less reactable, thanks to the animation skip. The 1.05 change removed this ready fire action. It does not give tanks the readying stance of bipeds. This change is definitely targeted at the more high end of the PvPers who know this. For the energy weapons, there are 2 changes in addition to a new energy cannon. The VE66 LRA energy rifle was nerfed in several aspects. This was a fairly popular energy rifle, especially in the Japanese region. One big reason is because of its charge attack's 900 meter per second bullet velocity, making it difficult to dodge. An important thing to note is the heat buildup is now increased to 205, which means that you can only fire 5 shots in a row instead of 6 before it overheats, because if you continuously fire, there is no heat reduction between the LRA shots. If you're mainly using the laser for uncharged shots as a kiting laser build, I highly suggest trying the smaller VE66LR, especially now. Between its better cooling, higher normal bullet velocity, and lower weight and energy cost, it is definitely underrated just because it is a smaller version of the LRA. The other change is to the heat buildup of the not so popular plasma rifle. The change applies to its uncharged shot, but I'm guessing this won't suddenly make this plasma rifle much more popular, as its uncharged shot is quite slow without the big radius of its charged shot. The VP60 LCB is a new back weapon affected by energy specialization. This is a blend of the smaller LCS and the larger LCA triple laser cannon. Continuously spamming these also takes 4 shots for the LCB to overheat, just like the LCS, making it more spammable than the LCA. This is a far easier to fit option than the triple laser, thanks to its cheaper cost as well. Overall, I think this is just a much more usable version of the LCA in PvP. The LCB's biggest twist over the other two laser cannons is its charged attack that takes 4.3 seconds to charge up. There is a reason for this long charge time. The uncharged LCB has a 0.7 meter radius for its projectile. When charged, this projectile grows to a 4 meter radius. Furthermore, it leaves a lingering trail that lasts for 3 seconds. This trail deals 1,621 base damage, 750 impact, and 280 accumulated impact to enemies that run into it. The wider radius definitely makes this cannon harder to dodge. The trail is not too significant in 1v1 for the most part, but in teamfights or in PvE where there are more enemies, this can definitely come into play. The coral shield has its effectiveness reduced, especially for the initial guard. This is quite a harsh nerf, but I believe they're trying to make the coral shield a shield that you keep up while firing your armed weapons. I think it is a preemptive move to prevent coral shield from being too OP with the new tetrapod legs, as you move very fast in the Lammergeier while hovering. However, they did change the coral shield so that it doesn't go down when firing a weapon that does a ready stance later in the patch notes. Next, for the split missiles in general, missile payloads now split closer to the target, including the hand missiles, even though they're not mentioned. Furthermore, the backsplit missiles guidances are also all increased from 135 to 145, making them more difficult to dodge. The smallest one, SPL-08, also got a decrease in reload time and homing lock-on time, which definitely feels quite needed, as it was just a lot worse as a smaller missile, even when compared to the other smaller missiles. The cluster missile, Delivery Boy, also received a buff in the form of better tracking trajectory. This is much appreciated, as to get the full value out of these missiles, it really has to make more than one pass over your opponent, and it was wildly inconsistent. It is nice to have another vertical missile option, since the VPM was also nerfed. Talking about the vertical plasma missile nerf, the guidance nerf and adjusted interval is definitely fine, as this was the most popular missile, due to their difficult to avoid nature, especially when your opponent tends to be pelting you with attacks horizontally too. It made the VPMs very consistent and a tad bit too good. However, patch notes did not mention another one of the changes to the VPM, which is that the missiles now stop tracking at 32 meters instead of 18 meters. This actually makes the VPM quite easy to avoid if you're moving, so they really want to make these missiles for hitting people behind cover, instead of being too consistent of a poke. Finally, there is a new hand missile launcher, the PFAU. The pulse missile launcher is interesting because it actually has 6 shots per clip, despite firing 3 when uncharged. Unlike other missiles, its charge shot is not a multi-lock. Rather, it fires all 6 shots of your clip like a rifle in a straight line, with a nerfed guidance. The PFAU's guidance is nerfed to 95 guidance when charged, so you can really think of it as a rifle that slightly curves. The charge shot does indeed use your FCS and firearm specialization for aiming, just like a rifle would. Be careful when firing them uncharged, since for the second shot, you will need to wait for the missile to lock on again before firing, so you can't just click fire twice in a row. Before we move on to the frame pieces, there are 2 more shadow changes they didn't list on the patch notes, both to melee weapons. First, the dagger received an impact increase for attacking into shields. The PA interference value didn't change at all, but these PA interference values aren't the actual values of the weapons, just an indicator. The actual impact and accumulated impact of both the uncharged and charged attacks of the dagger are buffed when hitting shielded targets. As for the laser lance, it got a hit radius increase and also some changes to its hitbox that basically made these consistent and easier to land. Moving on to the arms, the Melander arms got a slight recoil control buff. Perfectly fair, as these were not popular arms. The Mine Alpha legs are buffed once again by having its weight reduced this time. This leg was literally just buffed in patch 1.04.1, but it seems like FromSoft is still unsatisfied with where it stands. Compared to the HAL legs though, I do have to say that these legs look more appealing now as a defensive option. Next, we have the Tetrapod leg changes and a new Tetrapod leg. One important thing to note is that Tetrapod legs, while hovering, never used your thruster's base movement speed. It has a different movement scaling based purely off of weight. This patch changed the tetrapods so that different tetrapods have innately different hover speeds. Here is the graph for your hover speed versus weight. As you can see, the all-new Lammergeier is a lot faster than the previous legs. I'm also going to use this opportunity to talk about the Lammergeier legs. These are basically the wheelchairs in the air, which are incredibly fast as you move at up to 400 move speed while you're in hovering form. While the Lammergeier is extremely cool because of its drastically different animation while hovering and assault boosting, they're definitely a bit too fast when hovering, even with the nerfed quick boost of tetrapods. I will be showcasing some tetrapod builds in the future to show you guys some examples of how to optimize the usage of each leg, as I think it might not be that easy to grasp at the moment. I see people slapping Lammergeier legs onto their builds because it's fast, despite the fact that other tetrapod legs can serve better for their particular build. Finally, ACs with tetrapod legs now have reduced movement due to recoil when firing a weapon with high recoil control while in mid-air. This is another nerf to open up a window of opportunity for a punish. This is likely made to make sure that the Lammergeier can't just be zooming around, firing bazookas or whatnot without slowing down. Next, the Fortaleza legs received a pretty large nerf, which killed their popularity. These were definitely way easy to maneuver and extremely fast on the ground. They were especially popular combined with Majestics, so a nerf wasn't unexpected as the setup was just really solid on its own. Here are the actual numbers for the nerf on the stat screen, and then what the numbers actually translate to in practice. As you can see, nerfing the AB thrust reduces all types of AB velocity across the board by the same percent, and nerfing the AB EN consumption also nerfs the EN cost by the same percent. I've talked about what the readying action on tank legs actually were in the bazooka section earlier, so if you've missed that, go back and check it out. As for the effect of the weight on speed, the Fortaleza legs really took a steep hit here. Going past 80k weight on the wheelchairs were fairly standard, but even that has received a 22-point speed difference. They're definitely pushing wheelchairs to be on the lighter end, rather than being able to still zoom faster than lightweight builds at 90k weight. The Buerzel booster's assault boost thrust and quick boost energy load got nerfed by 7.8% and 26.1% respectively. This booster has been one of the most popular boosters in the PvP scene because assault boosting allows even heavier ACs to move fast while being tanky. It is the most ram booster by far in the major tournament that happened, especially in the higher rankings, so I think a nerf to this booster is warranted for more diversity, especially if they don't want to change assault boost itself. This makes it more punishing to run heavier ACs when they have to chase down a lighter one, and it also makes the assault boost speed on the bolt tank legs more significant, as you can still reach very fast speeds on the bolt legs despite being very heavy. Also related to assault boost, ACs with bipedals, reverse joint, or tetrapod legs now have a longer period after performing a boost kick, before being able to cancel into another action. Basically, a small nerf to kicks so they're not as spammable and a bit more punishable if you miss. As for some of the other fixes and improvements, I personally like the scan visual effects radius change because it should make things clearer rather than feeling like your scan covers a large area even if it doesn't. They also changed the attack disparity for melee attacks so it probably feels smoother to play with melee weapons. Fixed a bug that resulted in unintended enemy tracking when using a melee weapon while charging a back weapon. This most definitely refers to the oscillator bug, where you could be charging a back weapon and the oscillator will have a way over the top tracking. For not showing warning sign of Traino and Javelin beta, I honestly thought this was a feature, because if you manually aim guns and not missiles, there are no warnings. Apparently, missiles are supposed to still show the warning, I suppose. Okay, let us take a look at the rest of the new pieces. I've covered the Lammergeier legs alongside the Tetrapod legs already, so let us finish the other Lammergeier parts. An interesting piece of trivia is Lammergeier is another name for a bearded vulture, a very large bird of prey. While most vultures have a bald head, the Lammergeier has a feathered head. Why am I talking about a vulture's head? Well, that's because the Lammergeier head is about as bald as it can be. These are basically Tianqiang head number 2, even lighter but costs a ton more energy load. Because of the high energy load, this is not very stat dense. In fact, this is the least stat dense head in game, scoring worse than some of the higher cost heads. In my opinion, this is one of the worst heads in the game, and I will do my best to avoid using the Lammergeier head. The Lammergeier core is extremely interesting. If you've watched my core breakdown, you will know that the low-cost cores tend to have higher booster efficiency adjustment and lower generator output adjustment. This core is the complete opposite, acting more like higher-cost cores and has a low booster efficiency adjustment with a high generator output adjustment. It also has the second highest generator supply adjustment, so you can quickly regain your energy. In terms of defensive stats, this has the lowest defensive stat out of all the cores in the game, as fully displayed by its unarmored core. Schneider certainly doesn't have the pilot's well-being in mind. Finally, in addition to having one of the best descriptions in game, the Lammergeier arms fill the niche of a light arm having high recoil control, at the cost of firearm specialization of course. I will cover these in detail in my arms video after I do my recoil video. It most definitely is a niche arm choice, and not a generally good one. Last but not least, the Shao Wei Gatling Cannon probably feels a bit lackluster, and perhaps it indeed needs a slight buff to make them do their job effectively. However, I do believe that I can give some tips to make your AC better at using them. They are very different from other non-missile back weapons. Unlike other cannons, this cannon does not put the AC into a firing stance, and it overheats quite quickly. However, it is also accompanied by the fastest cooling in the entire game. It also has a longer range than Gatling guns you can hold in your hand. It is my suggestion that you can just have these guns held down the entire time you are within engagement distance, because its strong suit is a relentless amount of bullets over time to help you build up damage and impact. Then, thanks to its high cooling, it is easy to manage its heat to have them up for your stagger punish, even if you have been spamming them the entire time. Furthermore, the other tip I would give to people trying to run this weapon is that try to run them on bipeds that are stat dense. Take full advantage of not requiring a stance to mow down your enemies with a stat dense leg. Like and subscribe. If you want to support my work, please consider buying my fantasy novel or donating to my Patreon down below. With a book purchase, you can also request a topic from me. Krite, signing out.